Hey everyone, really chilling situation on Monday Night Football with Damar Hamlin suffering a severe injury, uh, rushed to the hospital, game postponed. There's a lot of stuff here that we should talk about that deserves to be discussed and pointed out. So that's what we're going to do here on the Locked On NFL podcast.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello everyone, welcome. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Locked On NFL podcast. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, free and available on all platforms. Thanks for making it your first listen each and every day. I'm here with Ross Jackson. I am Luke Braun. Of course, the tone of this show is going to be a little different than it normally is because the news of the day is what happened on Monday Night Football. So before we get into anything, let me just quick say for both Ross and me, it was really important that we do this show, that we talk about it, and that we don't just like skip this one or anything. And if that's what anybody else does on their show, that's great. It was just we didn't feel comfortable not having this conversation.
Yeah.
Especially because of the role that sports plays for a lot of us. And it's an escape, it's the thing you watch when you're licking your wounds from a hard Monday, and then something like what happened to Damar Hamlin happens, and suddenly that is another thing that you have to deal with and process. And I wouldn't feel right if you couldn't wake up on Tuesday morning and have all the podcasts you're used to listening to.
Yeah, we're a community,
that's what I think
right? Like
exactly, and that's our way of kind of being here for each other. So I also want to thank the sponsor of today's episode, who makes this kind of thing possible and helps bring us to you, and that is PrizePicks. They are a daily fantasy app that allows you to pick 2 to 5 players and whether they will do better or worse than their PrizePicks projection. You can win 10 times your money on your first entry, and you can get a 100% instant deposit match on your first entry with promo code Locked On up to $100. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. So let me quickly start by just recounting what happened for those who'd missed it, who weren't watching the game or whatever, but are now hearing all of this. It was late-ish in the first quarter of Bills-Bengals. Cincinnati was leading 7-3 and driving. T. Higgins catches a pass and collides with Damar Hamlin in such a way. Really big hit, really big collision. Damar Hamlin kind of pops up and then collapses back to the ground. And pretty quickly, players and around him, and there was actually an official that he almost fell down on, pretty quickly realized that he wasn't not okay. And started waving over trainers, and the medical staff acted very quickly. And there are details of the next kind of 10, 20 minutes that we'll get into in more depth that are worth kind of discussing in more detail. But that is what happened here. What we're not going to do on this show is speculate. We don't have any information as we're recording this on the nature of the injury. We know he's in critical condition, stable, which is important, and we are still kind of experiencing updates live as we do this. So as you're listening to this, you may know more than we do. But all of that being said, there's still, I think, a lot worth talking about.
Yeah.
But we're not going to play the guessing game or any of that stuff. So if you're looking for what happened or any of that, you're going to have to find that elsewhere.
Yeah, no speculation or anything here. Of course, we hope above all else that Damar Hamlin is okay, and that he makes it through all of this. And I think that that's the thing that is paramount in all of this, right, Luke? That like what we saw what we saw Monday night is just another reminder that like these are human beings that are out on the field. These are,
Yeah.
people's. I mean, his mom was in the stands. Like his mom
Hmm.
rode the ambulance back. Like he is someone's son. He's someone's sister. Excuse me. He's someone's brother. He's someone's husband, boyfriend, whatever. Like these are people. These are people. These aren't just like faceless football players' names and numbers on jerseys. These are human beings, and I think we got a very stark reminder of that tonight. And I think a lot of folks will sit there and say, "Well, there's an assume," or not in this particular instance, but it kind of makes you reflect on how we sort of discuss injuries or injury-prone players in some cases and
Hmm.
things like that, to where people kind of have this attitude of like, it's an assumed risk, but I think it's important to understand that an assumed risk of injury is not an assumed risk of death. This is a very different sort of scenario. This is like there's no blueprint for this. There's no
No,
there's nothing around and
absolutely
all that. You know what I mean?
unprecedented situation.
Right. And
Troy Vincent did say on a conference call that they do have a protocol for this kind of thing if a player collapses on the field, and they
mhm.
had, that ambulance wasn't like that ambulance is standing by for
Yep.
any particular game. They have different medical teams for this kind of problem or that kind of problem, and they have a fairly in-depth protocol, most of which you never have to see, which is a good thing.
Yeah, they apparently go through it once a year in every single NFL stadium, so they know what the protocols are. They go through all this. My biggest sort of, and just to start to get into kind of the deeper conversation here, my biggest sort of takeaway from this thing is that like as soon as a player starts to have CPR administered, cancel the game. We're done here, right? Like there's no more football left after that. There's
Mhm.
none at any point, right? Because generally, again, we don't want to get into speculating, but if CPR is being administered, that generally means a list of certain things have taken place. And so with that being the case, like at that point, there's no more football to be played. So from 8:59 p.m. Eastern time to, I guess, if we wanted to be kind of, kind about it, the equipment folks started packing stuff up around like the 9:45 Eastern time area or something
Right.
like that. Like,
Official word came through the broadcast, I believe, at about 10 on the dot Eastern.
yeah, too long, right? Like, I understand the idea that you want to go in and get the temperature of all of the players and the coaches and everything. And shout out to Sean McDermott as well as Sean McDermott, Buffalo Bills head coach, as well as Zach Taylor, Cincinnati Bengals head coach, for rallying their players, getting them back to the locker rooms, and then sort of taking the temperature and all this other stuff. But like, mental health wise, they all just experienced this collectively, like this collective trauma that just took place.
Hmm.
They don't need to be playing. They don't need to be playing a game of football
Right.
after that. So I don't know. And there was this whole like 5-minute warm up thing that also came through. Troy Vincent of the NFL says that he doesn't know where that came from. It was spoken about on the broadcasts and all that, but whether it was a thing or whether it wasn't a thing, it certainly didn't need to be a thing. Should have never been a thing. And that's just something I guess we can table now because the NFL doesn't know where that came from. But for these guys, like they went through a lot tonight, and as did Damar Hamlin, as did T. Higgins, who of course was the player that was tackled in this situation. But there were heroes in all of this tonight as well. Like beyond the things that maybe
Yes.
didn't go the way that they could have, there were heroes in here.
Yeah. I also wanted to extend a kudos, I guess, to Zach Taylor and Sean McDermott
Hmm.
for not only, kind of stepping up and being the leaders that you need to be, and also all of the captains on the rosters of both of those
For
teams,
sure.
Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, and
Hmm.
Stephon Diggs, so on. Um, for being the leaders that a group of men that experience a trauma
Yeah.
together. I mean, you see your teammate, your brother, right, receiving CPR, and you have to make a wall around him because a privacy wall around him because there is a stadium of 60,000 people watching,
That are also
and you're on Monday
experiencing that
Night
trauma,
Football.
right? Like,
You're right. That's unimaginable to have to go through that and realize that your friend might be dying behind you, and
hmm,
they don't know anything. I mean, we barely know more than they did at the moment.
right.
Um, that's horrible, and that leadership stepping up and being able to, I'll say, massage the situation to be deferential to those players, to be respectful to those players. I think it takes a level of integrity that's worth commending.
Yeah. Yeah, for
I
sure.
also wanted to shout out the whole TV crew on ESPN who handled that situation with so much grace. Such an impossible situation where you're getting no updates. You have to fill time. Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, I thought, did a great job. Lisa Salters who is an unflappable person. Hearing her voice shake as she
that was
reported
rough.
on things like shook me, because she
Yeah.
is usually the most like solid rock, right?
Right.
Susie Kolber, Adam Schefter, Booger McFarland, Scott Van Pelt, especially Ryan Clark, who is one of the most perfect people possible to be talking about this, because he experienced a similar situation back in 2007. All of those, I mean, when you're in blowout mode in a regular NFL game, you kind of want to talk about, I forget who said this, somebody who's done it. You kind of want to talk about anything but the game. You know, you think about like Madden in the bucket, right? Way back when. And all these, you know, it's a boring game. Let's talk about anything else. Talk about the playoff picture, just kind of whatever we can fill time with. In this situation, you can't talk about the bucket. You can't just start talking about the AFC playoff picture, right? And so they had to essentially dance around this situation and fill that time respectfully, keeping the audience informed. It's such an impossible situation to thankfully, mercifully, they finally cut off the broadcast. And I wanted to shout that out, because it's an extremely difficult thing to do in front of the entire country.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, the medical personnel, the first responders, everybody that was all a part of getting Damar Hamlin, the treatment, the care that he received on the field, as well as, of course, over to the hospital. We're going to continue on with this episode. We're probably going to, we're going to stick here with this situation and kind of discuss the league-wide impact, not necessarily the playoff picture just yet or anything like that, but like, how does this impact the other players around the NFL that watch this happen, who have to get back to practice on Wednesday? So Luke and I are going to kind of talk through that and bounce it all around. Luke and I, we're going to continue to do our jobs here and try to bring you the best possible content here on the Locked On NFL podcast. But a part of us also doing our jobs is, of course, to remind you that today's show is brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. So if you're looking for a little bit of a distraction here, PrizePicks is a great place to go. You pick 2 to 5 players. You could check out the NBA, for instance, which has several games ongoing. A whole bunch of different competition that's starting to heat up there. So you're looking for just like a little something to take your mind off of stuff, head over to PrizePicks. You pick 2 to 5 players, choose whether or not they're going to come in at more or less than their PrizePicks projection. You get those right, and you go up to 10 times your entry back. And first-time users can get a 100% instant deposit match by using the promo code Locked On over at the PrizePicks app or at PrizePicks.com. Once again, it's promo code Locked On. You put down $100, you get $100. They match $100. Put down $50, they match $50. It's a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 using the promo code Locked On over at PrizePicks.com or on the PrizePicks app.
Thanks again for coming to Locked On NFL and being part of our community, which is especially important in moments like these throughout the league, that in the history of the league, that sort of transcend the sport. And the chorus you always hear is that, nobody cares about what the game does for the playoff picture. Nobody cares about it. We all just care about if Damar Hamlin is okay. And we can all sort of come together in that. And there are so many physical, visible examples of that really touched me. The entire city of Cincinnati usually they'll light their buildings up orange for Bengals games. They changed those lights to blue. The stadium has blue lights right now. There are both Bengals and Bills fans circled around the hospital as you and I speak together, just trying to hope that Damar Hamlin can pull through. Many Bills players at the hospital, both team owners, players praying together, working together Sean McDermott and Zach Taylor working together. The one that I think blows my mind the most is Damar Hamlin in 2020 did a toy drive with a GoFundMe goal of $2,500. Well, that was still up. He never closed it, so you could donate to the toy drive whenever. It was at like $7,000 when this game started. As you and I speak, it is approaching $3 million in donations, and these are all the highest donation is $1,000. This isn't one person putting in a whole bunch.
Wow.
There's a few people that donated like $1,000 because they have that money, but this is $5, $10. This is just that many people coming together.
That's the community.
That's what sports, I think, are for. There's a question rattling around in all of our heads where, when somebody is in critical condition in the hospital and you go, my goodness, for a game? For entertainment?
Yeah. Right.
Is this all worth it? But I don't know. Look at how people come together over sports. They say like football is family, and I know that's part of that's like a slogan for commercials, but I do think that it's true.
Yeah.
That football brings teams together, right? It brings people closer than they are with you hear Ryan Clark talking about that. You see those people more than your family in the season, right? It brings families together. It creates that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's worth the effort.
Yeah, just to talk about it like from kind of, I guess, a close perspective. Like I think back to the COVID years, right? Of 2020 and 2021, where we weren't sure we were going to have sports in 2020 for a little while, particularly like March, April and everything. And then, we all stayed inside and all that, but then there was still kind of this communal experience because of watching the football game that might not have had any fans in the building, but had fans on social media, right? Like I got so close to all of you here at Locked On. Like I spent more time talking to you guys than I spent talking to anybody, anybody that I was close to. Obviously you and I were both like, we were living close to one another. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's, we were a little bit of a different example, but when it came to, everybody, like we became a family in our work, which is all attached to sports, this thing that these players go out and put their livelihoods on the line for, and we get the great honor of covering it, which also sometimes comes with the great challenge of covering these world altering moments. Like, let's be real, like this is a massive moment in sports, and hopefully Damar Hamlin sees the other side of all of this, but there is like so much of a larger additional impact to all of this, as kind of like us as a community, and how we sort of grow from this, learn from this, build from this, get impacted by this and everything. Like I hope anybody that like, and this is for you, listening or watching, like I hope that if you saw what happened tonight and you felt impacted by it, that you're talking about it, and that you are saying what you need to say around it, and expressing hurt, anger, whatever it is that you feel. If it's anger that's placed on the NFL, if it's hurt that's placed just sort of internally based upon like witnessing that, like none of that is easy. None of that. I know we got away from the conversation around like the impact around the league, but we can get to that. We get to that in a little bit. This conversation I think is important too, Luke. Like the impact of the people that are all a part of this community.
Yeah, and this was brought up as well in the Locked On Bills and Locked On Bengals episodes talking about this. You're not alone. And I hope that you don't feel alone if this really messed you up.
Yeah.
Because it messed us all up.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are going through the same thing here. And I hope that can bring people some level of comfort, because your brain's not set up to see somebody need to get CPR on national TV.
Right.
Your brain is set up to maybe watch an actor play somebody who needs CPR on national TV.
Mm-hmm.
but your brain's not set up to know that a 24-year-old kid's hanging on, you know?
Right.
That's not something that we are like set up emotionally to handle. And I think we want to keep the NFL at this distance a lot of the time. Oh, it's just a game, don't get too into it, don't go too crazy. Don't feel ashamed. And I think this kind of thing doesn't get said enough. Don't feel ashamed if it messes you up a little bit. If you need to talk to somebody, if you need to talk to somebody close to you or whatever to process what you saw on Monday night, that's normal and healthy and worth seeking out if you need it.
My DM's open.
Yeah,
like when we y'all listen, like when Luke and I were talking about, do we do this show, do we not do this show, the biggest thing that came out of that conversation was, or really, I'm gonna be honest, like, Luke, we never really explicitly talked about not doing this show.
We were never not going to do the show. No.
Yeah, we 100% were working on different ways to do it, and how do we discuss, how do we like go about this and all this? Yeah, how do we approach it and everything? But like the driving force behind all of it is like the community of people that love this game, and the community of people that were impacted by tonight. Even I'll say directly and indirectly, right? I mean, gosh, like I can't imagine, like T. Higgins right now and how he feels. Obviously, the Hamlins and the Damar Hamlin and his family, like the teammates of these players and everything, or of this player, as well as like even the opponents who are only opponents in construct, right? Like there's so many different sort of layers to all of this, but like it was never something I think that we talked about and said, well, maybe we shouldn't. It was always, well, how do we? And I think like that's just the attitude of sports as a whole.
And what is this for?
Right.
And I find myself thinking about that, and that's kind of why I brought that up earlier. Is what is this league for? What is the point of the NFL? And I think that kind of is the answer to what is a show like this for, and it's all about community. But I do think that there are also some things worth discussing, or at least just kind of even just reporting on, with this injury's impact on the league as a collection of a lot of people who just experienced something traumatizing.
Yeah.
So we can get into that next.
Yeah. Let's get into that here in just a sec. If you're looking for another distraction, I'll use this quick break as an opportunity to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at BetOnline as well. Much like we were discussing with PrizePicks, if you're looking for something to just kind of have a little bit of fun and poke around with, BetOnline.net's absolutely a great place to do that. Odds, lines, and props for all your sports wagering needs, but they've also got news, scores. If you like sports podcasts as well, which we know you do because you've tuned into this one, you can go and check out what they have to offer. It's actually the kind of quickest way to get into, if you are, looking at betting or wagering or anything, to get all of the kind of like trends in action and kind of know where everything's going. So you can go and check that out. There's, everything around the NBA is there. Everything around, what could potentially be happening more before the MLB season gets started is there. NHL as it continues to roll along. So lots of different things for you to check out. And of course, look, BetOnline does a wonderful job supporting us, giving Luke and I opportunities to do what it is that we love to do, which is be here and be a part of this community. So it's our pleasure to be able to help to give back to them as well. So you can go check them out today, betonline.net, where the game starts.
Before we move on, as we are recording, we just got an official word from the Buffalo Bills on Twitter, the official Buffalo Bills account. I'll just read it out loud. It says, Damar Hamlin suffered a cardiac arrest following a hit in our game versus the Bengals. His heartbeat was restored on the field, and he was transferred to the UC Medical Center for further testing and treatment. He's currently sedated and listed in critical condition. A little bit of new information there as from when we started recording here. This isn't a normal thing to happen.
Right.
And I think it's worth talking about how this will impact everyone in the league, not just the Bills and Bengals, but like you mentioned at the beginning of the show, everyone's got to watch this dude whose heart stopped on the field and go practice on Wednesday.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
There's a lot of this game that's already so mentally challenging, right? Like just you talk to any player any time, and I spoke with Alvin Kamara, New Orleans Saints running back, not too long ago during one of our press conferences. It wasn't like a one-on-one thing or anything like that, but like we were talking to him, and we kind of asked him a little bit about like the idea of like giving up, like going out and not giving 100%. And what Kamara observed was that if you go out there and you don't give 100%, like you could get hurt. And he also clarified that like you give 100%, you can also get hurt, and that's right. Kind of what we saw.
That's why they teach tackling the way they teach it and stuff.
Right,
There's a lot of
And so, but the thing that he was talking about was that like they go out there and they risk all of this, and so now there's kind of this extra layer. Something like this happens, and then it kind of brings you back to, I don't know. I think the closest thing that I have in my lifetime that maybe is relevant to this, outside of like the Ryan Clark situation, and then the Christian Eriksen situation from Euro 2020, I believe that was maybe like Dale Earnhardt, right? Like that was the earliest one that I could think of, and that kind of changed everything in terms of that landscape. And so you wonder, all of these guys have to come back on Wednesday and go back to practice. How do things potentially change moving forward? You know what I mean? Like how do you have those things? And do these teams wait until Wednesday to come back, or do they find a way to come together tomorrow, just as a community of people, as a family of people, as a unit, and say, I love you, or whatever, like whatever it is that they have to say to one another. And I think like I bring up the Alvin Kamara thing as I kind of struggle to connect the dots. I'm sorry. It's obviously like a lot, but I bring up the Alvin Kamara thing because like he spoke so passionately about the idea of like going out there and putting your livelihood at risk, putting your health at risk and everything. And I don't think that these players have it in them to go from this and then not find a way, if they're asked to go back out on the field next weekend, which of course will very likely be the case, not give 100% physically. But how do you make that leap mentally? Like that's the hard part for me, is how do you make that leap mentally after what you watched tonight?
Yeah, and unfortunately, you and I are not the right people to really have that because, you and I are not former players or anything.
Right, we just
and we have plenty of athletes at the Locked On Network that may have better thoughts and better perspectives on that than you and I can provide. But what I will say is, that's up to who that group is, right? Every group of individuals is going to be a little bit different. And for some, it's the kind of thing that can bring you closer. It's for, and I don't think I'll ever get out of my head watching Stephon Diggs trying to rally his teammates on the sideline during that 5 minutes when they thought they were going to have to play. The courage and strength that the resiliency that kind of thing takes. And if you knew who Stephon Diggs was and what he has been through in his life, you wouldn't be surprised that he showed that. But it is nonetheless, that kind of thing blows me away that a human can be capable of that.
It's a superhuman thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And so we can't say how your favorite NFL team will handle this kind of thing. But all of these guys have that very unique experience, that experience that you and I, Ross, can't share, of kind of going out there every Sunday with that implicit risk that I could lose my livelihood today. My leg could explode and I could lose my livelihood today. And I really have no idea. And there's always that chance that something like this can happen. And I guess what I'm trying to drive at is I'm glad that all these guys are in a group of other people that at least can share that experience.
These are superhuman people amongst superhuman people. And when I say superhuman, I don't even mean like superhuman in that like, oh, their pain threshold is higher. No, I mean here. I'm talking about up here, in this little noggin right here. Like the fact that they go out there for, if they're lucky, 4 or 5 years, and in some cases, I mean, Tom Brady's been playing for what? I mean, he's 45 years old.
22
And
years.
yeah, and so like 20 plus, going out there and knowing what they're risking and still being able to do what they do, and doing it for the love of the game, the love of the fan base, the love of whatever it is, the love of the craft. Like it's just an incredible thing. I agree with you 100%. Like there is something special about someone's ability to be able to overcome that and say, we're going to go and do our job. I think that's an incredible thing. I think it's an incredible thing, and it is an example of mental fortitude that is not readily available in every example, but it is one that is almost requisite for the NFL
Yeah, for somebody who
or
plays a
professional
game.
athletes. Period.
Right. Well, I think in particular football, because it is an unbelievably brutal, cruel, and unforgiving game. And these guys go out there and play it for no reason other than to entertain people who paid to be entertained by it. And it's their dream.
Yeah,
And they work toward it. I mean, Damar Hamlin worked toward that his whole life.
entire life.
And that was the biggest moment of his career, this game, this Monday Night Football game, AFC Showdown, this whole deal. And I think it sounds weird in these contexts, but I think it's something that's just worth having a reverence for. I do think that it is at least a little important to just quickly go over the nuts and bolts of where the league goes from here, because a lot of people probably have that question, and it would be silly of us not to at least try to lay out what the options are. Obviously, this game is currently in a state of suspension in the middle of the first quarter with a score of 7-3 Bengals. They could theoretically resume it kind of whenever the league decides to. Obviously, there are a lot of factors that go into it, and as of this moment, we have no idea if they're going to do that or not.
Right.
The other option would be to essentially throw out the game, either call it a tie or a no contest, or accept the score as is, as though, sometimes if there's a weather problem at the very end of a game that was over anyways, that kind of thing has happened. Whatever happens there, obviously will have implications on the AFC playoff picture and stuff, and that's not really what anybody's thinking about. I would hope that we get some sort of answer to that on Tuesday, especially if they have an intention to play the game, because there's, of course, Week 18 coming up, but I suppose they could postpone a couple of games there or something, have those be on a Monday or something like that, and finish things out from there. But we are in unprecedented territory, and everybody from the NFL to your favorite neighborhood podcasters are doing their best. So I ask for kindness and patience, are very rarely misplaced things. So that's all I ask.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how they handle it, because we're talking about players going back to practice on Wednesday, and sort of my hope is that there's like mental health professionals that are there and ready to talk, and available to these guys, sports psychologists or whatever, ready to talk to these guys and be available to them. But I can't imagine, I think about postponements. The last time we saw those would have been during the COVID season in 2022, to where they were postponing games for 2 days. So we're talking about that would then take us from talking about teams going back to practice that witnessed this 2 days later, teams going back to practice, as opposed to, it would take us from that to now teams that were a part of this, that were in this, that were impacted by this, that saw this happen, having to, compete and play a full game in a couple of days. I don't know if that's enough time. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they go about it. They could go no contest, and I guess go by like win percentage or something like that, and do that. That's what they had planned to do during the COVID season, if there was any team that didn't finish with as many games as the other teams and stuff like that. So
Right.
it's not fully It's not fully fleshed out though, like you said. Like it is unprecedented. So we'll see.
Right. Which
we'll see
which
the way
would
that they do it.
functionally be a tie mathematically.
Right.
Which would affect for anybody who is wondering if they do call it a tie, that would mean that the Bengals clinch the AFC North, the same as if they would won. And I believe the Bills would also be in the same situation seating wise as if they had lost. So that would be functionally the impact of that. But again, obviously,
Small potatoes.
Small potatoes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Do whatever
small
you have to
potatoes
do
right
to respectfully navigate this situation, which we hope the NFL can show that respect.
Muster up a way to do it. And again, as we wrap up here, above all else, we hope that Damar Hamlin is okay. And we hope that we get positive news and that you all get positive news around him here very, very soon. And of course, we hope that you are well also. So we appreciate you and hope that, Luke and I wanted to do this show today and still be here. And so we hope that we were able to provide you with a little bit of, not necessarily distraction, because obviously we talked about everything, but just a little bit of solace and maybe respite. And yeah,
I think we're processing
process it with us. Yeah. And let you see us process it, so it's okay to struggle processing it, because I know I certainly had my moments. So yeah, so we appreciate y'all very much for joining us for another episode of Locked On NFL. Tomorrow, Tony and James will be with you, and we'll continue to roll along here and get you as many updates as we can as we get solid information moving forward. For Luke Braun here, I am Ross Jackson, and we'll see you here soon on another episode of Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.